All right. Our notes today is on changes in the brain, of course, over the course of the lifespan. It's on the notes. It says effects of aging on the brain, and we're actually going to approach this a little bit differently. Other than just aging, we're going to start off by focusing on brain damage, on causes of brain damage, and the most common causes of brain damage. And then we'll look at consequences of brain damage as well today. Sound good? So aging of the brain and brain damage today. All right. Objectives: reconstruct brain changes across the lifespan. Kind of looked at that a little bit with our introductory activity or introductory article that we have with B.F. Skinner. The brutal truths about aging in the brain. So we kind of hit on that already, and analyze how aging, learning, and stroke-related damage affect the brain. I think I've already asked this question to you guys before, so that's why I didn't put it in our bell work today. But what age would you consider your brain to be fully matured? Fully matured. You don't have to write this out, but just discuss it real quick. What do we say for the most part? We've kind of implied this idea of prefrontal cortex being matured at what age? Anybody remember from the article, Ryan? 22, early 20s. It's kind of subjective, varying from individual to individual. But your prefrontal cortex is usually fully matured by the time that you're in your early to mid 20s. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. If you specifically think about brain weight, in which your brain weight starts to decline, okay, what age would that be? What age would your brain actually start to lose weight, start to decrease in size? Go ahead and tell that to your partner real quick, the number that you're thinking right now. That way you have to commit to something and share it with somebody. What's that?
23.
You think it's already on the downhill climb?
Peaks at 22, starts at a climb.
Yeah. All right, what did you say, Ms. Williamson? 50. And you're optimistic that you've got a lot of life in front of you before it starts to go downhill, right? How many were like Ms. Williamson said, 50 or so? 50 or higher, right? Interesting. That's way too high. Way too high. Good try. So who said less than 50? Who said less than 50? Yes.
Mid to late 30s.
Mid to late 30s. You're getting closer. 40. Over the hill. And then going downhill there. Anything else? It's actually at the age of 30. Right? 30 is the year at which you start to lose brain weight. Okay? Especially like I said, 24. Right? 23, 24. Now, around 30, so a lot of times we think about this idea of losing brain weight and we get really pessimistic about it. As if, man, I'm past the prime, life is going to be much more difficult thereafter. I'm just not going to be able to do things like I used to. And there's a lot of fallacies associated with that particular mindset, right? Because of a concept we're going to hit on a little bit today, plasticity. The brain is adaptable over the course of the entirety of the lifespan. We should not be as pessimistic, right? A lot of it is you're establishing strong neural pathways, and these neural pathways that you don't necessarily need and use anymore, that's going to be a part of the brain weight that you're going to be losing. So it's not overly detrimental to your health, right? You guys remember the article? What did it say? By the time that you get to, I think, 70 and 80, your brain weight is what? In comparison to a child's? It's about less than that of a child's, right? By that point in time in your life, okay? And you may think, well, did I become childlike again? You think about B.F. Skinner. Was he childlike? Not necessarily. He was still smart. Maybe not as quick as he once was, right? But he can still function at a high level, okay? Alright, let's think about causes of brain damage for a second here. I've got some images to help us to think about where brain damage can originate from. This one's a little bit of a challenge. I know it's got the Simpsons there. But the idea here is that there's many of them. They're together. Where can you get brain damage from here? Anybody got any ideas? What could be a source of brain damage? Oh, that's good. That's good. There's a book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog because of a lack of social interaction, deprived of that from a young age, does have some very strong consequences physiologically on your neural development there. That's good. Wasn't exactly getting to that one, but that's a very good point. Maybe I should start using that. Yeah. Anybody else got another one? Something we're going to talk about next week is about genetics, right? Genes being passed down, and genetic mutations, abnormalities can lead to certain types of brain damage. Okay, this one, of course, traumatic brain injuries, right? Getting hit in the head. Not just, football could be one place, but it could be happening in a lot of different places. I think about, young children, with my two little guys, they fall often, right? Duke used to, Preston, we were a little bit more careful with him, but Duke, he just, maybe it's because he's got an older brother, but he hit his head often. We used to joke around saying that he needs to wear a helmet all the time because he would hit his head so often. And we laugh about it. We try to have fun with it, but the reality is it could be extremely dangerous. I've heard of individuals that that Daniel Amen guy. He talks about guys that he's treated before, and the reason why they have certain types of psychological disorders, especially like ADD, ADHD, or some extreme behavior, really goes back to an event where they hit their head at a young age. And a lot of times in our culture, if you survive it, we don't think much of it. We think, well, you're all right. But the reality is there could be some really strong long-term consequences associated with just a hard hit to the head. Okay? This is a personal experience that I had. I got nailed in the head. I was working in construction. I told Mr. Glick about it. I told him this was a dangerous environment for me. I was in a period of transition between teaching jobs, and so I had to pick up a job in between. So I got into construction, installing fireplaces into people's homes, and we would put these mantles over the top, right? And the way that we put them up on the wall, it worked until it didn't work one day. So some of these mantles, they were pretty heavy, and we had used liquid nails. It's like this thick glue stuff that you put on the walls, and stick it up there, hold it for a minute, and it would stick. And these things could weigh 100 pounds or so, right? And I was underneath and cleaning off the face of the fireplace, the glass of the fireplace, and it came off the wall. Bam, nailed me. And so I had to go to the hospital. I had to get checked out. I had all these brain imaging scans and stuff to make sure my brain wasn't swelling up to the point where it's going to be causing damage or anything like that, right? So I walked around for the next month with this huge black eye for a while. I just tell everybody, don't talk back to your wife. That's what happens. All right, another cause of brain damage is where the brain is deprived of oxygen, and so that would lead to a what? What do we call that? It's what we referenced with unilateral neglect the other day. A stroke, right? Where there's some kind of blood clot, and so the brain is deprived of oxygen, and for an extended period of time, you have that stroke, and then you can have some brain damage there. Our stroke of insight, the woman that shared how her left hemisphere kind of turned off, right? That was a result of a stroke there as well, so that's really common. This one would be tumors, right? And putting pressure, right? A growth. This is actually my brother-in-law. We went to school together, college together, and he had some abnormal behaviors, and it was really reflective in like lazy characteristics. He would oversleep and not go to class, and so we just thought he was lazy, right? And then he would sometimes we'd be in the middle of class and he'd just fall asleep in class, and it would get to the point where he wouldn't wake up, right? And so sometimes if he was in the middle of class, his friends, he'd fall asleep to make sure that he didn't wake up in like the next class, right? They would take his chair, pick him up, and they would carry him out into the hallway, and so he could just sleep out there, right? So we were just making fun of him a lot. And then he went to the hospital and we realized he had a tumor, and so we all felt bad after that situation. But he had surgery and had his tumor removed, and he called it his mailbox, opened it up, got the tumor out, and he's fine today. He married my older sister, so he's kind of a different guy, but he's all right. Other causes of brain damage? Drugs, right? Consumption of any type of drug, right, can have a negative effect on our brain. Remember we mentioned drugs once before. We said that the neurotransmitters that the drugs produce, so dangerous. Remember we talked about that idea of that lock and key analogy with the neurotransmitters and the receptor sites. Remember the drugs produce these neurotransmitters are kind of like skeleton keys. They work on any of the receptors, right? So extremely dangerous, okay? Now I want to think about consequences of brain damage. So what can happen when we do have brain damage? And these are just a few of them. You can have, strange psychological disorder like the ADD, ADHD. You can have some other big-time issues that Eamon talks a lot about. But these are a few that I want to highlight. Aphasia, visual neglect, amnesia, agnosia, and loss of balance. I think I go through, nope. Thought I had slides for each one of them, okay? All right, aphasia. You guys heard this one with our jigsaw the other day, right? So it's a dysfunction. So you got Broca's aphasia, we mentioned that already, where everything comes out mumbo jumbo. You can't understand it, can't pronounce words like you normally would. Then you have Wernicke's aphasia, where the words come out clear, but then the syntax of the sentences are all messed up, right? So you got aphasia. We talk about visual neglect or unilateral neglect. That's the same idea where items in our left visual field we're not referencing, right? We'll miss those things. Amnesia, where you forget things. I think of, what was Jason Bourne? I like Jason Bourne stuff, right? He had a little bit of amnesia at the beginning of that first movie. Agnosia. This is one that is a little bit strange. Agnosia is where you lose the ability to recognize faces, like facial features, okay? So the scenario that has been presented to me that I've heard of before, where you have like this husband, right? And he's got agnosia, brain damage, consequences of agnosia. And so his wife will come see him and, be with him in the hospital room or whatever it may be, and he can't recognize her anymore, right? He doesn't recognize her face. However, he hears her voice, and he does recognize her voice. So you can imagine the predicament that would create. That he hears the voice and he recognizes it and, finds comfort in that, but at the same time it's coming from a face that he doesn't recognize anymore, okay? So it could be a really disturbing type of situation, okay? Loss of balance, like this guy. That's kind of a dangerous thing to do there. Bounce ball, love the bounce ball. Probably don't combine that with the bounce beam. That may be a little bit too dangerous there, okay? Are there age-related variations in the brain that causes changes in behavior? And the answer would be yes. So we're going to think about changes in the brain over the course of the lifespan. That's going to reflect upon some of the things we've hit on a little bit already. First off, though, I don't think that we're aware of this, but with every physical growth spurt that you have, development's taking place in another part of your brain. I want to think specifically for a second about people your age, okay? You look at the freshman group, right? And some of them, especially the males, right? Look how they haven't reached the maturity aspect, right? Like physically, a lot of them are smaller in size, right? A lot of them haven't reached puberty yet, okay? Or fully completed that particular process yet, okay? Now, when you look at the sophomores and you look at the juniors, right? You see a big physical change, okay? And with that physical change, stuff's going on in their brain. Their brain is maturing as well, okay? There's a lot of changes going on in the brain over the course of that 2-year window there, okay? So sometimes you see freshmen and they're a little bit more squirrely than, you juniors and seniors, right? They'll do a lot more irresponsible things because their brain is not fully developed there. You can also think about younger children. I mean, there's some huge growth spurts for them between like the ages of 2 and 3. What are they acquiring between the ages of 2 and 3? A lot of times they can't talk, right, and speak very fluidly before that, but then, I mean, they're physically growing, and then they can, you ever seen one of these little kids? I mean, they speak like adults. It's crazy, right? How much of a change takes place over that 1-year window there, okay? All right, so this developmental process, it can be broken down into 4 different areas. You got synaptogenesis, myelination, hemispheric specialization, and plasticity. And we're going to break each one of these down. Focus on synaptogenesis for a second, okay? So the concept that I want you to make sure that you're familiar with and you remember with synaptogenesis is this concept of pruning, okay? What we're doing here is we're pruning synapses. So your brain, with all the neurons there, you have a lot of fluid-filled gaps, right, between your neurons. Now, as you grow and progress, you're going to develop and strengthen certain neuronal pathways, more so than others. So these other neural pathways that haven't been flexed and established, right, you don't necessarily need them. So what you can do is you can actually rid yourself of them through a process of synaptogenesis and pruning. Sound good? So you may think, well, I'm losing out on these potential synapses, right? That's not a good thing. Well, it's actually it's a very good thing, okay? So it helps our brain function at a higher level there, okay? So it's like pruning with, horticulture. When you prune your trees and your bushes around your house, you're creating a healthier environment for us when synaptogenesis takes place in our brain. And we're creating a healthier brain. I believe that the particular neurotransmitter that you may want to write down, acetylcholine, is produced at a higher level after synaptogenesis is taking place. All right? I'm pretty sure that is correct. Don't have my notes right there in front of me. All right, myelination is the second one. We've talked about myelination. You may want to write down the reticular formation there again. That's focus center of your hindbrain. So the development of myelin sheath around your axons speeds up the efficiency of your neuronal transmissions. Again, this will take place in different parts of the brain at different points over your lifespan. And we've highlighted the reticular formation there. Sound good? The third one, hemispheric specialization. So I mentioned this is really Friday's lesson or Friday with lateralization and hemispheric specialization. So language and logic go into the left hemisphere. That happens earlier in life, so that's where we see the development of language. However, their spatial skills is going to come a little bit later, like 7, 8, and 9 years old. So you really think about young kids. You remember we talked about them having a difficult time differentiating their right from their left when they're really young, but later on they'll eventually get that. They'll know their right hand from their left hand there. Okay. The last one, plasticity. So plasticity, it's going to occur. This is a good test question right here. plasticity is going to occur more often in younger children than in comparison to, say, an older adult. Okay, it's easier to happen, to take place in a younger child than in an older adult. However, do not want to give you the impression that it doesn't take place in an older adult. I want you to think about the neuroscientist that had that stroke, right? She looks 30, 40, right, years old whenever she has the stroke. And she said it took her how many years to recover? 8 years, right? So 8 years of recovery, that's 8 years of brain plasticity, right? She's still able to function. She's able to go back to work. I mean, you think about the workload of a neuroscientist, right? She was able to withstand a stroke and still, continue her career thereafter. Okay, she had to work to regain the language ability, right? And redevelop that, but that's plasticity. Now, if she had that stroke at a younger age, like as a child, it probably wouldn't take 8 years. It would take maybe a year, right? Brain plasticity is much, much quicker at a younger age, right? But the idea here is that you can shape, mold your brain just like Play-Doh, okay? What can we do to compensate for a lot of these things? You can do different types of exercises like the balance ball to help you with your balance. You can do other types of exercise like reading, or just like healthy exercise like walking and exercising. All of those things are really healthy eating. All those things are really good for brain health. I do have a video, I think, attached at the bottom of the biology section, biology and behavior section. Daniel Amen does this whole spiel about how to take care of your brain, how to create brain health, and maybe we'll take a look at that. Maybe I'll show that to you maybe a little bit tomorrow. Okay. We already mentioned this, but other sources of brain damage: genetics, blow to the head, stroke, and tumors. Just reiterating some of the things we talked about already in class. Does anybody have any questions about changes in the brain? Brain damage? No? All right, that'll be it for today.